cooking for more than one person. So I'm going to take a quick look at making kitchen furniture, stoves and cupboards and so on, using the little furniture kit that we looked at in the previous tutorial. So I've got one here. It is a group of, I guess it would be 27 voxels, which have been stretched by placing micro voxels in the corners, and look at the previous tutorial if you do not know how to make it. And I will just fly up to my kitchen and we'll look at the cupboards while I'm making them. All right, so this is what I'm talking about, these cupboards here. And the stoves too, which I had a little fun with. And in fact, the table is voxels as well. So let me go in the future site of the dining room just so we have a little more space. I will paste this down here. All right, so this is super simple. All I'm going to do is copy this a few times till I've got a row of cupboards. Oops. Gonna be. All right. Now, for a little contrast, I'll copy the vertical row here, and I'm actually going to delete with it. All right, so I've aligned it with that row. It's now right on top of it. I'm going to use the Remove Voxels feature. I have this in tweak mode, so that means that I held down Control when I left-clicked, which is when this box popped up. So that lets me ensure I'm not pasting here with voxels, and I am choosing Remove Voxels. And when I confirm, you can see that vertical row of voxels actually got deleted. So I'm going to do that all the way down here, maybe every other one. Now I'm going to paint everything. I'm going to paint it a nice wood. I'll go for striped because most of my house is burled wood. Go for planks. How about that? All right. Oops, I missed the end. I'm actually going to paint the ends a different color though. I will make the ends burled for contrast. There we go. And I'm also going to make this line here the dark burled. There we go. So now we've got, as you can see, a nice set of mostly complete cupboards. I don't know if I necessarily actually like the planks, so I can play around with my wood textures. Maybe I'll do the horizontal grains, but not the planks. But play around until you're happy. Then my kitchen counters, the countertops, I decided I was going to make marble. But you can make them anything you want. And I quite like the tackish gray marble, but we could even do it green. And I will probably want to just fill in that little divot there. Now remember, before I painted it, these were all identical, so I know that voxel layer is a little divot even though it's not visible because it's been painted, so I can just copy that back in. In the kitchen behind me, the top is thicker because I had used a thicker space between the voxels. So you can play around. If you want a thicker countertop, you might want to use a larger microvoxel at the corners of your original kit you started with. But yeah, that's it. And then the handles, I just use props. Oops, not materials, props. There are a lot of things that you could use as props, or as handles. The pitcher, the mug, what I actually used was the mug. You could also use the handles of the lids or the stock pots, for example. But let's, since I painted it green, let's use the pitcher because the pitcher has a nice green handle. It's going to match. So I'm going to rotate the prop around, then shrink it down a little bit, sink it in. Again, tweak mode by holding control will help me position it and straighten it out a bit. But there we go. And if I right click and go into tweak mode again, I can hold down Alt to take a copy of that prop easily. Alt, holding down Alt takes a copy. There we go. Ta-da! Very easy. Now the one thing I did not cover is that this is not going to perfectly align with your ground. If I paste this directly onto the floor, you could see the floor raised up a little bit. So I can solve that, and I showed this in a previous tutorial, but I can solve that with the line tool. Check out the line tool magic tutorial. But for the purpose of pardon me, of this demonstration, I'll just show you just running the line tool along the bottom of this a couple times, and you can see as I do it, it pulls the bottom of that down to where a normal voxel boundary would be. So it's still on the top, it's still where it always stopped, but on the bottom it now aligns with the bottom of a voxel, and that's a little hard to see because the stripe of the striped wood is actually kind of hiding that, but if I were to paint that marble, you'd see a little better. So now let me copy this and paste that here. You'll see the floor does not get deformed, so I can just replace that bottom layer, and this can now be pasted. This counter is now ready to go. Can be pasted along the floor anywhere I want it. Super easy. All right, that's cupboards, and then the stove is very similar. Really, all I did was take a couple sections and paint them stove colored, basically. Could have used obsidian, could have used iron, could have used tin. I think I ended up using an iron. I don't know if I want the hammered look. But let's see how this looks. It's not the iron I used before. I'm going to want to fill in those little divots that I made for the cupboard. And I'm going to want to get rid of the pictures. That's a very dark metal. Let me make that tin just so we can see a little more easily. Tin. No, don't like the hammered look. Here we go. It's not that great. I'm gonna go check what I used. Maybe it is obsidian. Oops. polished obsidian. Oh, you can play around. All right, let's paint that. Then I just used a little bit of ice for the windows. Used ice rather than glass because the ice is frosted and I don't really want people seeing through it. Now, you'll remember this is still all the same pattern, so the initial shapes are going to be maybe not perfectly what you want. What you can do though is undo here. We probably want to take this big shape and copy that, and we can actually paste that anywhere we want. We no longer care about maintaining the vertical line that we needed for the cupboard. So we can freely paste that to however we want it. There we go. I could make that one big one as well. But yeah, it depends entirely on your preference. And then I'm going to go back to my props and I'm going to use some saucepans as burners. And I'm going to get that flat. I'm going to shrink it a little bit. And then I can sink it down. It's probably a little too small. Etc. I made my cupboard a little narrow. I probably should make it extend back a little further, then I could have larger burners, which would look better. Turn on my light here so you can see a little better. Sorry if that was dark. And now I need some knobs. So again, how about, let's see, I could use anything for knobs really, but I kind of like the control panels. Shrink them down small. Life is much easier if you can cheat and use a prop instead of building everything out of voxels. So I am all for making life easier. There's no award for using only voxels. So use whatever makes the most sense in your particular situation. Sink that in a little bit. And again, I can hold down Alt as I drag in tweak mode. We'll just duplicate the prop easily. So there we go. In my kitchen, I actually got a little fancy and I used some of these silver goblets behind. I use gold here for a little extra contrast. So I did actually 2 layers of props for the dials. Really depends on what look you want. Oops. That was not sticking out far enough. It sank inwards. So yeah, totally optional. Play around with whatever look you like. It's getting a little too fancy. But there we go. And the burners. So you could just leave it like that. Could just be an electric stove and those would just get hot and nothing would happen, but I was having a little bit of fun with our emitters. So I looked for, under interactive, under emitters. There's a lot of fire emitters and I played with a few of them. I quite liked the gas fire as well, but it was a little large, so I ended up going with the campfire. So this is going to be a very violent burner. If I shrink it down as much as I can, it's the smallest it'll go, then the flame also gets a bit smaller. It's still a fairly violent fire. I could sink that actually under the burner, so that would make it look a little smaller, and that's one option. And what I probably want to do is I probably want to make copies of this first before linking them up. So I'll just do the back row here. I won't do them all, but there I've made 3 copies. Now I want to set it up so that the switch turns on the burner. So I will right click on the switch, link. When clicked by player, now I need to click my campfire emitter. And what do you want it to do? I want it to toggle on or off. So when clicked by player, toggles on, toggles off. Now that's all linked. Now I want to go into tweak mode and actually sink it down underneath a bit. So there we go. Obviously don't want to sink it down before I've linked it because then I would have trouble clicking on it. And I just repeat that. When clicked by player, select the next one, toggle on off, tweak mode. There we go. So that's the stove, and then obviously decorations as needed. I used the copper pans just because they were a nice contrast to the black and silver stove, but if you chose a different color of stove, you might want a different color of pan. Ta-da! Super easy.